It was the summer after I graduated high school, when I took a part-time job cleaning offices at night with my cousin Jeremy, mostly to save up a bit before college. And while most of the buildings were quiet, sterile places, there was one particular, 3-story real estate office downtown that always gave us both a weird feeling, like something was constantly watching us from the moment we unlocked the glass front door to the moment we left. And it wasn't just a vibe either. Lights would flicker, even when we hadn't touched anything. The elevator would ding and open, on its own. And sometimes I'd hear what sounded like someone softly clearing their throat down a hallway we had just finished vacuuming. Jeremy always laughed it off, said it was old building crap, but I could tell he didn't like working there alone either. And we always made sure we were in the same room by the time it got past midnight. One night around 12:45 a.m., while we were on the 3rd floor finishing up the bathrooms, I noticed movement through the reflection in the frosted glass window across from me, like someone walking slowly past the hallway behind me. But when I turned around, there was no one there, just the hallway and the low hum of the vending machine at the end. I told Jeremy and he brushed it off, but we worked a little faster after that, not speaking much, just getting it done so we could leave. And when we finally got to the ground floor to clock out, he realized he left his phone charging in the upstairs break room, so he asked me to wait near the front while he ran back, maybe 5 minutes tops. I stood just inside the glass door scrolling my phone, eyes heavy, when I heard a loud slam echo from above, followed by what sounded like hurried footsteps, then nothing. I waited, but Jeremy didn't come back down, so I called out, thinking maybe he was messing with me, but no answer. Then my phone buzzed and it was a message from him. "Where are you? I'm by the entrance." My heart skipped because I was standing at the entrance and he was nowhere in sight. I replied, "I'm literally here, no one's around." And then from the corner of my eye I saw movement again in the reflection of the glass. This time, unmistakably, a figure standing just a few feet behind me, completely still, and when I spun around, heart pounding, no one was there. But the air felt cold and thick, like something had been inches away from me. Just then, Jeremy came jogging around the corner from outside the building, pale and out of breath, swearing he had just tried to open the door and saw me standing there completely still, not moving, not reacting, just staring ahead like I was in a trance. Except I hadn't seen or heard the door move at all, and I certainly hadn't been frozen. But the scariest part was when we checked the security cameras the next day. There was a 5-minute window, exactly when I'd been standing at the door, where the footage showed the camera glitching and distorting, static and lines scrambling across the screen, and when it finally cleared, there were 2 shapes standing. By the entrance, one of them was clearly me, and the other was something taller with no face, just a dark outline, standing completely motionless behind me before vanishing between frames. Back in college, I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment off campus in a sketchy part of town. Not because I liked the area, but because it was all I could afford. And the building had this decayed, crumbling charm, with yellowed hallways, flickering ceiling lights, and neighbors I rarely saw but always heard through the paper-thin walls. I never felt totally safe there, but nothing ever happened. Not until one rainy Thursday night when the power went out around 11:45 p.m. while I was reading in bed, and not just a normal outage, the kind that fills the whole place with this unnatural stillness, where even the sounds of the rain seem quieter, like the whole world is holding its breath. I lit a candle and was just about to grab my phone for a flashlight when I heard a knock at my door. 3 soft taps, slow and spaced out, and my stomach dropped, because who knocks at that hour, especially during a blackout, and especially when the hallway lights are out too? I sat there frozen, listening, waiting, telling myself it was probably a neighbor or someone confused. But when I didn't respond, the knocking started again, this time louder, more deliberate, like whoever. It was new I was in there and was getting impatient. I crept to the peephole and looked through, expecting to see a shadow or maybe nothing at all. But instead I saw a person, completely still, standing with their head tilted down so far I couldn't see their face, their hands pressed flat against the door on either side of the frame, like they were bracing to push their way in. And something about their posture, the complete silence they kept despite knocking, made my blood run cold. I backed away, not saying a word, not making a sound, just willing them to go away. and for a while it seemed like it worked until I realized they hadn't left. They were now walking slowly around the building, tapping on the windows, circling, waiting for an opening, and I could hear it. Tap, tap, tap on the bedroom window now. Even though I lived on the second floor and no one should be able to reach that without a ladder, I stayed crouched in the dark for what felt like hours, until finally, by some miracle, the power came back on, and every light in the apartment flickered back to life, flooding the space with warmth and safety. And when I looked again through the peephole, no one was there, no sound, nothing. But when I finally opened the door the next morning, I found muddy footprints leading up to the entrance and away into the hallway. But the strangest part was the shape of the prints, bare feet, but wrong. Somehow too long, with what looked like 6 toes on each, splayed wide like something that had never worn shoes in its life. I reported it to the building manager, who just gave me a tired look and said, "If they knock again, don't answer," and walked away like it wasn't the first time someone had brought it up. When I was 17, my older cousin Logan took me and 2 of his friends on an overnight fishing trip to a rural river spot miles off the main road, tucked away behind thick trees and an old railway bridge that hadn't been used in decades. The kind of place locals claimed was cursed land because of something that happened there back in the 50s, a story about missing kids and strange drownings, but we didn't really listen. The place was beautiful at first glance, quiet, except for birds and the occasional rustle of leaves, and the water was calm, dark, and still. We set up camp just a few yards from the bridge, cast our lines and laughed around a fire until the sun dropped completely behind the hills, turning the whole forest into a silhouette of shadows. Then the feeling shifted, almost instantly, like the world around us had gone still and was listening. Logan was the first to say something felt off, and he wasn't the kind of guy to get spooked easily, but even I could feel it, the cold that crept in fast, even though the forecast said warm and dry, the sudden drop in wind, and the complete silence from the woods like every bird and insect had decided to hide at once. We were thinking about calling it early when we heard it. A splashing sound, soft at first, then heavier like something large was moving through the river just under the bridge. We froze, flashlights pointed toward the source, and caught a glimpse of something pale and slick just beneath the surface, dragging itself slowly to the bank before vanishing into the reeds. We stood still, barely breathing, and that's when Logan whispered, "Did you hear that?" And I nodded because I had. It was like a child's voice humming a tune, coming from under the bridge, completely out of place and terrifyingly clear. His friend Dan called out, thinking maybe someone was messing with us, but the humming just stopped mid-note, and after a few moments of silence, something replied in a voice that wasn't quite human. It said, "Come see," low and wrong, like a recording played backward, and we all backed away slowly, grabbing whatever we could from the camp. As we turned to run, the ground near the edge of the water seemed to pulse like something massive was shifting beneath it, and then we heard the wet, dragging sound again, followed by laughter, high-pitched and echoing through the trees, even though there was no one visible around us. We ran for what felt like miles, not stopping until we reached the truck, soaked in sweat and too terrified to speak. And when we looked back one last time at the path behind us, we saw a figure crouched in the middle of the road, too thin and too long, its eyes reflecting our headlights like a predator's, unmoving, just watching. Logan floored the gas, and we didn't look back again, not even when we hit the highway, not even when the laughter finally faded behind us. We never told our parents, and none of us ever returned to that river again. But sometimes, especially in the dead of night when it rains and the power flickers, I swear I hear that same humming, faint but persistent, like something followed me home that night and is still waiting for me to come see what's hiding beneath the surface. A few years ago, I was driving cross-country for a new job and had to stop for the night in a dusty town in New Mexico that didn't show up clearly on my GPS, the kind of place with more boarded-up windows than streetlights. But I was too exhausted, trying to keep going, so I pulled into a roadside motel that looked straight out of the 70s. Faded neon sign buzzing, parking lot empty, and a front desk clerk who barely looked up from his newspaper when I checked in. I was given room 108, a unit on the far end close to the ice machine, and I remember thinking the hallway felt colder than the rest of the motel, like there was a draft or something leaking through the walls, but I was too tired to care. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and collapsed on the bed without even taking off my shoes. Except around 2:30 a.m., I was jolted awake by the sound of heavy footsteps just outside my door, slow and deliberate, pacing back and forth like whoever it was couldn't decide whether to knock or leave. I stayed still, listening, my heart pounding. And then came the soft sound of ice spilling into a bucket, not once, but multiple times, as if someone was going back to the machine again and again, even though it made no sense for anyone to be filling that much ice in the middle of the night. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, so I peeked through the peephole and saw nothing, but the footsteps started again almost immediately, this time moving toward the ice room just down the hall, followed by a weird dragging noise like something wet being pulled across tile. I cracked open the door just a few inches, and as I looked down the hall I caught a glimpse of a man. Tall, wearing a tattered grey coat, hunched over the ice bin, his back to me, moving in this twitchy, unnatural way, almost like he wasn't using his legs properly. I whispered out, "Sir?" But he didn't turn, just froze in place, and then slowly his head started to turn, way too far, like his neck was bending at an impossible angle, until one eye locked onto me from across the hallway, and I swear, it didn't blink, just stared, unbroken, even as I slammed the door shut and locked everything again. I stayed up all night, every light on, and at sunrise I went to the front desk to report what I saw, expecting confusion or maybe some concern, but the clerk didn't even look surprised. Instead, he sighed and said, "Room 108 again, huh?" Before telling me I wasn't the first to see him, that years ago a man froze to death in the ice room after locking himself inside during a mental break, and guests in that wing still claimed to hear the sound of the ice machine running when no one was there, or footsteps when the hall was empty. I left immediately, didn't even ask for a refund, just drove out of that town as fast as I could. But every time I pass a roadside motel now, I think about that pale, distorted face and how it looked straight at me like it knew I saw it. And I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't closed the door in time.